Hello, I'm Anastasia Lin, and I'm pleased to say that this is my first video acting as spokeswoman for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. They're doing groundbreaking work on China and how Canada and the rest of the world should engage with the communist superpower. So in this video, I'm going to review some of the key points about China raised by Michael Cole in his recent MLI paper about China's sharp power. Michael notes that many have cautioned that People's Republic of China would one day threaten the system and values that define Western civilization. They were routinely dismissed. They were alarmist, critics said. Worse, they had a Cold War mentality or were anti-China. The popular view was that engagement would eventually make China more like us, liberal, rule-abiding, and perhaps even democratic. Beyond a doubt, the West's openness was instrumental in helping China develop its economy and lift millions of people from poverty. Those who hoped the Communist Party would modernize along similar lines, however, were in for disappointment. Instead, the party clung to an authoritarian one-party ideology that is alien to the West, while ramping up a Chinese nationalism that has reached alarming pitch. Meanwhile, the party tightened its control on all aspects of Chinese society. They continued cracking down on dissidents, the press, and intellectuals, threatening democratic Taiwan, breaking promises over Hong Kong, and launching a disturbing thought reform campaign against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Whereas Chinese President Xi's predecessors had wisely opted not to defy the international system, Xi overturned that policy, largely in reaction to perceived weakness in the democratic world. Weaknesses such as failing moral self-confidence, the 2008 financial crisis, and UK's decision to leave the EU. China would use its new influence and economic might to refashion the world order in a way that suits its ambitions. Money, of which there's no shortage in Beijing, went far in undemocratic countries in need of infrastructure investment, whose leaders resented transparent and accountable alternatives such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The China model thus took off across Africa, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere. However, that strategy could only go so far. To get its way with democracies, Beijing needed a novel approach. It was one thing for China to conduct business with autocrats, but democracies imposed rules of transparency and leadership changes that stood in the way of Beijing's ambitions. What was required was a way to circumvent those rules and to undermine the democracy's firewall. In other words, the party needed to change us, to make our society more like China's. In several years, China pursued an energetic charm offensive, showering Western institutions, corporations, and governments with money, opportunities, and the hope of more to come. Chinese tourists and students poured in, as did visiting experts and buyers of all things Western. Targeted countries simply lacked knowledge about who they were dealing with. Most believed that they were interacting with ordinary Chinese firms, officials, journalists, and representatives. And most were indeed normal. But little attention was paid to possible connections to the Chinese security apparatus, the party's United Front work system, or to the pervasive ideology that underpinned their activities. Gradually, China deployed a constellation of media, chambers of commerce, businesses, think tanks, cultural associations, and other entities to manipulate, intimidate, confuse, and distract our officials, intellectuals, business leaders, and Chinese diaspora. Hidden to many, China's political warfare and influence operations created China cheerleaders in academia. The activities also silenced critics of the party and helped Chinese military, often through front companies, to acquire the technology it needed to modernize its forces. This now threatens stability across the Indo-Pacific. Revelations of odious Chinese penetration and intellectual property theft in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, the Czech Republic, and elsewhere in recent years have sparked an awakening that was long overdue. Authoritarian China now is an undeniable presence in almost all Western countries, including Canada. Our societies therefore need to weigh the benefits of continued business as usual engagement against the costs to the values we cherish. So various initiatives, the United States is now leading the charge by bringing together like-minded democracies that increasingly see the need for a concerted response to China's challenge. Unfortunately, Ottawa does not appear to understand the urgency of joining that concert of democracies, whether due to a naivety and a romantic attachment to a China that no longer exists, or as an act of defiance against Washington. The government remains unserious in its approach to China. True, Ottawa did not allow the acquisition of Canadian construction giant Aecon by a Chinese state-owned enterprise. On the other hand, it did allow other transactions with national security implications. It allowed Chinese telecom Huawei to participate in the recent installation of underwater monitoring devices near an American naval base on the West Coast. The government still has not banned Huawei from supplying equipment to the next generation 5G wireless communications network. And Ottawa has made no secret of the importance it attaches to a free trade deal with China. Michael Cole warns that unless there is a change of heart, Ottawa risks turning Canada into a weak link in the alliance of democracies. Failure to make the right decision could cost us dearly. What is at stake is nothing less than a stable and peaceful world order that helps keep us all safe and offers the world the best hopes of prosperity and freedom, now and into the future. I'm Anastasia Lin for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute.